So this is the fabric I'll be using for today's project. It's a linen fabric and I really love the vibrant color. I got this fabric from the shop. They have this section for leftover fabric, so it's mostly like 1 meter and mostly 1.5 meter. That is why you see two fabrics. And for this dress, I'm going to mark everything straight on the fabric. So what I'm going to do is to fold my fabric in two like this and make sure it covers the widest part, which is the bust, so quarter of the bust. So at the top, I'll make a horizontal line and mark the shoulder and also mark the neck. From the shoulder, I go down 1 inch and then make a line from the neck to there, and then from the neck I go down 3 inches, which is like the standard measurement for the neck, and then make a square like that. From the shoulder, I go from the center, and then from there I'll mark from my shoulder to my bust, which is 9 for me, and then from there I make a horizontal line on that mark. From my shoulder again, I'll mark my shoulder to waist, which is 16 for me, and also make a horizontal line. And then on the bust line, I'll measure quarter of my bust measurement, and also on the waistline I'll measure quarter of my waist measurement and add my dart. I did add 1.5 darts. And then from the shoulder line, I'll make a straight line from there and measure my armhole depth, and then also make a horizontal line over there. So that is the upper bust line, the bust and waistline. So on the armhole depth line, I'll find the center, and then from the center I'll go in 1 inch. So I'll then draw the armhole depth. Usually the front is much deeper than the back armhole. So at the waistline, I'll mark 4, which is my nipple to nipple measurement. It's 8 divided by 2. Then I'll mark my darts, which is 1.5, so 3/4 of an inch on each side. And then for the dart length from the bust line, I'll go down 2 inches and mark my dart. So to prevent gaping from there, as usual, I'll find the nipple to nipple length again and then go down 3/4 of an inch, which will be my underbust, and from there I'll just make a little arc there and then go cut half of an inch on both sides. If you remember the contouring I've been doing on the pattern, it's exactly like that. So this is the new dart. So from there I'll just join the side like that and then add 1 inch of allowance to the side. And then from there I would draw the neckline. I want to make a boat shape neckline. So from the center and from the neck, I'll go down 1.5 inch because I don't want the neck to be so tight under my neck. So that's why I went down 1.5 and then draw my boat neckline. And then now I'm just adding allowance to the neckline, the armhole and the shoulder. I added half of an inch. So once I'm done adding the allowance, I'm going to draw the back armhole. So it usually touches the armhole depth line, but I also considered half an inch of allowance. That is why it's not touching it. So once that is done, I'll just cut my pattern out, or I'll just cut the fabric or the top out. So I'll use the front to cut the back, but the back is almost bare. What I want to do is to mark the shoulder line and the armhole and the side and a little bit of the waistline. So just mark the shoulder, the armhole, the side, and then I want the waistline to be about 2 inches long plus 1 inch allowance, so it will be 3 in total. So plus 2 inches, you can make it wide as you want. So that is basically the back, and then I'll draw a straight line from the shoulder to touch the waist. And then once I get that, I'll just cut it out. So that is all I need for the back. And now I'll cut the extra fabric from the armhole since I already cut the back, and then I'll just notch that and also mark it on the other side of the top. So this is how it's looking, and this is how the front and back is looking right now. So for the sleeve, I'm going to use the rest of the fabric that I cut the top from. So it measures about 30 inches, so that is good. So I'll fold it into 4 now, and then the length I am using is 14 inches. So I did mark 14 inches from the down to the top, and then make a straight line. So from the straight line, that is where I'm going to draw the curve for the armhole. So I did draw the first one, which is this one, but I noticed that it was a bit too high or too long for me. So you would see that I went again a bit lower and did another curve. So this one was okay for me, and then I just did cut it out. And that is how I achieved the sleeve for this dress. And then at the hem, I'm going to make a curve. I'm going to curve it a little bit. And this is how the sleeve is looking. Now for the skirt part, I'm going to cut 2 rectangles, one for the front and one for the back. So you basically the front one is like double or 3 times my half of my waist, and also same for the back. And I also did cut some straps for finishing the neckline. So what I'm going to do now is to sew the darts. And also I forgot to mark the dart properly, so I'm correcting that first. So from there, I'll stitch the waist dart on the front, and at the back what I'm going to do is to forge a dart over there, because if I don't do that, it's gonna gape. So I'll just mark a straight line and then mark 1/4 of an inch on both sides. But also I just realized that the dart has to disappear at a point, so I extended it to the far end of the side of the back, if you really understand what I mean. So I'll mark the same thing on the other side, and that will reduce the gaping at the opening at the back. So what I'm doing now is stitching the waist dart on the front of the top, and I'll also stitch the dart at the back, the forgery dart, to remove the gaping. And once that is done, I'll top stitch it to make it lie flat. So this forgery dart at the back can also serve as a style line. So now here we are, the dart is stitched, and what I'm going to do now is to trim the extra that was left after the dart has been stitched, and that is not going to affect the back in any way. And now I'll join the shoulders of the top. So right side facing, join the shoulders of the back to the front and pin them and stitch. So once that has been stitched, I zigzag the raw edges, or I finish the raw edges with a zigzag stitch. You can use your serger, and I also top stitch the front waist dart because it gives it like a nice look as well. So now what I'm going to do is to finish the neckline. So I did cut a bias strap. So what I'm going to do now is to just fold it in half and then pin it at the neckline on the wrong side of the fabric. So from the back to the front to the other side of the back, and then stitch close to the end, or about 1/4 inch, and then from there I'll trim the allowance a little bit to reduce bulkiness, turn it over to the right side of the top and stitch close to the end. So I've done this a lot of times on the channel, and this is how the neckline is looking right now. So now what I'm going to do now is to make the gathering stitch on the front skirt. With the back, I'm going to put elastic band there, so I'll put that aside, and now I'm going to hand stitch the gathers. You can use your sewing machine, but I think the hand stitch is more easier for me. So I did make the thread a little bit longer than my half waist measurement, because I'm just doing it for the front skirt. So once that is done, I'll use the tape measure to measure if I have my 14 inches at the front, because my total waist is 28, so divided by 2 is 14. So once I get that, I'll just secure the stitch and cut out the thread, and then I'll use the sewing machine to tack down the stitch so that it doesn't move. And at this moment, I just needed a break. I was so tired and hungry. This is not an easy job, so I decided to make some green tea and then just relax a little bit. If you really know me, I don't joke with my green tea. It's my favorite drink. So yeah.
A few moments later.
So I'm back to work, fully energized, and what I'm doing now is pinning the front skirt to the front waist of the top, and I'll also attach the back piece to the back, the back skirt to the back top. So you can see it's still straight without the gathers, because I will first attach the top to it before attaching the elastic band. So I'm just attaching the top to the skirt part, and this is how the front looks like, and also the back. So this is the time where I'm going to attach the elastic band to the back side of the skirt. So I will start from the beginning, the very beginning. So I will be stretching the elastic band whilst I stitch. So this is how it looks, and once that is done, I'll turn over and use the straight stitch to stitch it down. I first use the zigzag stitch to stitch the elastic band, and here is how it looks like. I want the back to drop a little bit, but I noticed it was too low, but I will fix that later. So once I was sewing, I noticed I still have extra fabric, which if I don't use now, it's gonna be wasted. So I decided to make a pocket for the skirt. So I did fold my fabric into two and then mark about 5.5 inch and then plus 1 inch allowance, and then make a straight line. And then I'll just draw the shape of the pocket, but yeah, I'll fold the fabric in two again because I want 4 pieces. So I'll just reduce the length of the pocket again like this, and now I'll cut it out. So once I finish cutting it out, I would have 4 pieces, 2 for each side. And this is an inseam pocket, so it will be on the sides, is the pocket that you don't see. So this is it. And from the waistline, I'll come down 6 inches and then notch it. Make sure the sides are aligning before you notch it, so that it will be straight when you want to fix the pocket. So I will pin the pockets to the side, right sides facing, and then pin the other one to the other side. And then repeat the same process on the other side of the dress. So I will stitch about 1/2 inch, because my side allowance, my total side allowance for the dress is 1 inch. So I'll stitch 1/2 inch on the pocket seam. And then once that is done, I will top stitch the pocket to hold it in place so it doesn't roll off the side seam of the dress. So once that is done, I'm going to join the side seam of the dress. I'll just pin it, and then I'll stitch onto where the pocket is, and then stitch the pocket 1/2 inch allowance, and then start again on the side seam at 1 inch, because the dress has 1 inch allowance, if you get what I'm saying. So once that is done, I'll just trim the excess allowance. I'm not a fan of big seam allowance, so that is why I always trim down my seam allowances, but you can leave yours if you want. So now it's time to attach the sleeve, and I'll just unpick the side a little bit from the armhole because of the technique I'm going to use. So I'll find the center of the sleeve and then attach it to the shoulder of the top, and then also attach the end to the side seam part of the armhole, and then repeat it on the other end as well. And once you've pinned that, once I've pinned that, I'll start to work my sleeve up, and from the beginning I'll just pin it flat, and then when I'm getting to the upper part of the sleeve, I'll start to fold in the remaining or the excess fabric to form a pleat. You can actually gather it if you want. So I'll do that on this end of the sleeve, and then when that one is done, I'll turn it to the other end and repeat the same process. You see that I'm pinning it as flat as possible because I don't want the folds over there. I want it on the upper part of the sleeve. So you can see that I'll be pinning it flat, and then when I get to the upper part, I'll be folding in the remaining fabric to form the pleats. So I'm just folding random pleats. So once that is done, repeat the same process on the other side of the sleeve and then stitch it down. But make sure your pleats are moving in the same direction. So what I'm going to do now is to sew the side seam and make sure the armhole seam is matching. So I'll pin it and then sew it to the side seam onto where I unpicked to. So once that is done, I'm going to make channel for the elastic band at the arm, and I did cut an elastic band which is comfortable around my arm, and then made the channel the size of it. So I'll just pin it all around, repeat the same process on the other side of the sleeve, and now with the help of the safety pin, I would insert my elastic through the channel. And then pin the end to that side so that it doesn't get lost in the channel. So once that is done, stitch the ends of the elastic bands together and stitch the hole. And once that is done, I would hem the dress. So I'll first make a zigzag stitch and then turn it over and stitch again to form the hem. So this is how the hem is looking right now. So I still had extra fabric, so I went ahead and made straps for the back, and also for the skirt part, as I already said, it was a little bit too low, so I went ahead and stitched it in a little bit to reduce the length. And we've finally come to the end of this tutorial. If you made it up to the end of this video, guys, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time, and I'm definitely going to try this dress on for you guys to see. And this is the pocket. I think I didn't show you when I did sew it, so yeah, here is it, and hope to see you again in my next video. Stay safe and bye.